just got to tell you, as I was listening to the conversations already this morning, I'm just incredibly humbled and blessed to be among you today having this conversation about our state. To have a Will Weatherford be our champion for this conversation in the Florida Chamber, and Mark Wilson's passion and leadership is so important. I got to tell you, on a different note, I'm pretty humbled to be introduced by Michelle this morning. What many of you don't know is her father worked for Gulf Power Company. He was a plant manager of one of our generating stations and actually created the legacy of community service that many of our employees are carrying on today. So I need to thank him for that, and I hope she'll pass that word back to a valuable retiree. Look, our conversation today is about when businesses take the lead. And in every community across this state, there's examples of this. So I'm hesitant to call this a really classic case study, but I think it is an example, at least in our world, in Northwest Florida, where the business community finally got more aligned to achieve an outcome to impact education and workforce development. And obviously this is about Escambia County. Mark showed you some statistics earlier. I'll broaden that a little bit. 1st Congressional District 1 is home to 87,000 of those 2.9 million individuals that he talked about that are living in poverty. In Escambia County specifically, 1 in 4 of our children is in that population. So that's at least a peek into the need for us to think about how we improve those outcomes in our education and workforce development systems in Escambia County. Quickly, I want to give you a little bit of a profile on Gulf Power Company. I'm just honored to lead a team of about 1,200 individuals that are serving the 8-county, most western 8-county area of Northwest Florida, our little slice of heaven of Florida. And this company has 93 years of doing business, investing in infrastructure, serving communities, and providing electric service to customers. But we also have what I think is a pretty rich history of serving our community in this space. In 2001, probably one of our most foundational decisions we made was to develop an academy in one of the high schools in Escambia County that focused on introducing young people to the energy industry. And today, 17 years later, 5 or 6 dozen of the teammates we have at our company today have come through this academy, where they learned about our industry, they created interest in our industry, and I think we were able to show them, as you heard Commissioner Putnam say, it isn't all about getting that 4-year college degree. There are some trades and some certifications that you can earn along the way. Come to work for Gulf Power Company and earn a great career for you and your family. We've also sparked the interest in many of those too going on to those higher degrees. And so we think it's served both our purpose and a community purpose of helping young people grow. Our foundation at Gulf Power Company has long been involved in doing grants and scholarships. We engage in STEM-related programming, whether it's robotics competitions, it's cyberthons, you name it, we want to be there for those. And then lastly, as you see there, targeted industry workforce development, partnering with our customers, in fact, many of our manufacturing and industrial customers, to look at ways to grow interest in the certifications that can be earned in high school that move you forward into many of the careers in our customers' spaces. I got to tell you though, about 2.5 years ago, 3 years ago, Jennifer Grove, who many of you probably in this room have met before, she and I were in a conversation. We really just started asking ourselves, kind of to what end are we investing our time and our talents, and even some of the treasurer of our company? Is it systematically moving our communities in the right direction? All of these individually are wonderful, and they serve their individual purpose, but are they necessarily aligned even within our own company, about what we're expecting out of our investments in these? And then a really interesting conversation, probably one of the best business leader conversations I've had since I have lived in Pensacola for over 6 years now, was had with a group of the business leaders of these companies that you see here. Certainly Gulf Power Company is not the only business in Pensacola and across those 8 counties. You see many of them here. But I remember a dinner one night between myself and the president of Sacred Heart Ascension Hospital, Baptist Healthcare Systems, and Navy Federal Credit Union. Many of you may have heard of Navy Federal, now the largest employer in our region, headed to 10,000 associates in Escambia County. And we started talking about aligning our resources together. And you know what? We discovered that for all the good talk we've had over decades of partnership, we really weren't as aligned as we could be Those 4 businesses, those 4 large employers, not to mention many that you see here and all of the small businesses in our community, were we really aligning our efforts for the community and with the community to achieve the educational outcomes and the workforce development outcomes that we knew we needed to achieve, to support those young people, to support those young adults into careerhood? I got to tell you, we are really just simply asked the question, to what end are we doing all of this? And that night, we decided we wanted to do something different and started as a business leadership team recruiting others, many of which you see here, toward something we think was bigger than that. But you know what we also had to discover as we said that, it's a whole lot easier said than done. We found as we did some research that we're really program rich and system poor. Now, what does that mean? So you see some wonderful individual organizations in those arrows, right? But as a community, even within some spaces that we're working on, let's just take, for example, VPK, voluntary pre-kindergarten programs. So many programs in our community, were they really even measuring the same success rates, same outcomes, pointed in the same direction, sharing with each other the learnings that they were achieving individually? Those learnings weren't really even being transferred collectively to the community. So that's why I say program rich and system poor, because in many cases we were pointing in different directions. Now I think this is representative. It's not necessarily that we were 180 degrees apart, but I can assure you for every degree of separation over time, that creates much more difference in the outcomes. So aligning ourselves, recognizing that this program rich, system poor phenomena existed, we all agreed that the bigger outcome here was this coordinated vision and action. How could we develop a community collaborative effort toward collective impact? And we've heard the phrase collective impact already today, and so some of you are familiar with that. Maybe this is a good case study. We're very early in our evolution. Mark actually asked me to come speak on other platforms, Future of Florida Forum. He asked me to do this about 2 years ago. And I said, Mark, I just don't think we're ready to tell our story yet. But I can tell you over the last 2 years, we've come so far. I want to share with you a video that I think does probably an even better job than I can do standing here about what Achieve Escambia is all about.
In Escambia County, we have an abundance of organizations, partnerships, and programs working to address the needs of our community. Until now, most of that work has been segmented, isolated. Achieve Escambia provides a new way to improve the needs of our community by aligning existing efforts toward a shared vision. This approach is called collective impact. By aligning our community's resources from businesses, education, faith-based communities, and nonprofits, every step of the way, everyone is able to achieve success. Achieve Escambia utilizes the cradle-to-career model to tackle complex issues and improve educational and workforce outcomes in our community. Using data to drive our decisions, our successes are measured by the big 4 outcomes of our effort, focusing on every stage of our children's development. Improved kindergarten readiness, improved academic success, increased high school graduation rates, and increased career readiness. Achieve Escambia provides a unique vision and a shared strategy for a collective impact. Based on priorities identified by our community, Achieve Escambia is currently working to improve outcomes in the areas of kindergarten and career readiness. Join us as we chart a course toward greater educational achievement for our students, for our community, for our future.
So a couple of points about this slide that you see here. First of all, you see cradle to career. That was mentioned in the video. I hope you all do recognize that the outcomes we're looking for really do start in the cradle. They start at birth. And the things that a young person learns in that cradle with their families is so important to things like preparing for kindergarten. You take that, you go all the way through 3rd grade reading scores, you go to 8th grade math scores, you go to high school graduation rates, you look at attainment of post-high school certifications and degrees. That's what we mean by cradle to career. And we as a community decided, and I emphasize we as a community, not just for business leaders or the people you saw listed before, we decided we wanted to work on this entire continuum. Now, I'll say this, and I'm going to come back to this in a minute, there's only so much focus you can apply. You need to choose the right areas of interest from the community and be sure you're attacking those. But our overall Achieve Escambia effort will be along this entire continuum over time. Now, I'll also say this is a long-term endeavor. One of the things we talk about at our Leadership Council meetings for Achieve Escambia is many of the people in the room today will not be the people in the room when we achieve the outcomes we're looking for. When we are able to take the statistics today is 66% of our young people, our children, are ready for kindergarten. When we're going to see that number at 70, 80, 90, many of us won't be in the room. This is a long-term commitment by the community. We all recognize that. But it's going to take this alignment of the entire community's resources so that we can empower everyone to achieve. Now, when we started this, I want to tell you two quick lessons about going from point A to where we are today. Two big lessons for us. First of all, many people in the community said, yeah, we've seen this before. We've seen things like this start before and they fizzle out. There are a couple of differentiators, I think, this time around that we're very hopeful will make this time different. One of those is not the usual suspects. Many times we put this on the superintendent's doorstep, or many times we put this on the teacher's doorstep or the parent's doorstep, or the business community's not involved enough. Well, you know what? This time around, let's get everybody in the huddle. And this is intended to represent that we now have a cross-sectional group of leaders from this community, from Escambia County, all gathered. And what do you see in the center? You see the student, the young person, and the job seeker at the center of everything we're doing. The faith-based community, we've heard that mentioned several times a day. We have dozens of pastors from our community engaged. We have the base commander of NAS Pensacola at our Leadership Council working with us. We have higher education, we have our superintendent, we have the teachers union and the PTA president on our Leadership Council. Along with many of the business leaders you talked about. We have the head of the local NAACP at the table with us because we have to recognize there are some equity issues in our community at least that we need to have honest conversations about as we move this forward. So one differentiator was it's not the usual suspects, and we've got as many diverse leaders at the table working through this together as we possibly can. The second differentiator I would give you is this is data-driven. Boy, this is an emotional topic. It's emotional for a parent. It's emotional for a teacher. It's emotional for some elements of our community who feel like they're underserved. But when you can make this about the data and you peel it back point by point and find the real core indicators and the real contributors to success, you can't run from the data. And as a community, part of our effort was to help the community understand the data. And you know what? I gave the example earlier of two VPK providers doing things that they thought were successful. When you got them to compare their own data, they realized maybe they weren't as successful as they thought they'd be, and if they learned from the other, they'd collectively have a greater impact. So I got to tell you, data has been an enormous piece of what we do. It's a commitment we make every time we get together as a leadership council to be sure we're grounding ourselves in the data and away from the emotion or the political or the whatever that has kept us from being successful before. And you know what? That also builds trust because you're not doing it verbally from this point of emotion. You're doing it from the facts. And I think that has gone a long way to building greater trust across our community for us being successful. We have focused, I'll mention quickly, in kindergarten readiness. We developed a collective action network in our community to focus on kindergarten readiness. Thus far, that looks like increased enrollment in VPK programs. But you know what? We had to figure out better ways to get young people enrolled because many of the parents didn't have access, the easiest access they needed to just simply get them enrolled. It means we're developing a community-wide, improved developmental screening model to know where our young people stand before they even get to school. And just last night, one last example, our Leadership Council voted to fund a 3-year-old VPK program that was in danger of being defunded due to some changes in Title I funding. We were able to bring our resources to the table much quicker than state government could, much quicker than local government could, And going into next school year, we're ensured that VPK program is going to stay alive. And we're going to inject some innovation into that program so we can learn more about how a young person learns and see if we can replicate that across our county. So, I think the point here is working together. Collective impact isn't about 4 business leaders getting together and having dinner and talking about what it looks like. It's about engaging the entire county, the entire network of people we've talked about here. I must say we're very early in this journey. 2.5 years into our journey. We are obviously very focused in Achieve Escambia. I'll quickly mention, because on that heat map Mark Wilson showed you, it also showed a hot area around Bay County, Panama City. There's another similar collective impact effort called Alignment Bay County going on there. It might be another good case study for many of you to learn from. But I hope that gives you some feel for when business leaders can at least kickstart and initiate and align some change. We as a community, in this case, have really come together, and I think I may not be at the table when it happens, when we see that improvement we've talked about. But I can assure you today our community is more aligned on these outcomes we need to achieve for our young people than we've ever been before. And you know what? We all know that a good education is a great pathway to prosperity. And that's what we're here about, is to create those pathways to prosperity. So I appreciate your attention. I think we're going to do a couple of questions, Michelle, and then we'll see if we can get back on schedule.
Sure. I think we have time for one question, so
Okay.
I'll join you over here if that's okay. Thank you for a rich presentation. One question is, why does cross-sector leadership matter so much in this model, and what did you do to get commitment and buy-in from those key community leaders and partners?
You heard me use the word trust. I probably didn't give that enough attention. I'll just have to say and admit for our county there was a lack of trust between some groups and the superintendent, or the business community and the faith-based community, whatever it was. And we needed to get across some barriers if we're really going to work together. But you know what? It just had to be a very inclusive effort to start with. And look, just the name Achieve Escambia came from the community. It didn't come from our leadership council. We held developmental workshops across our community for several months, and we let the community name what this initiative ought to be. And you can't do that in silos. You have to have these cross-functional leaders at the table. And it's hard to pull together, but it takes an investment of a lot of personal time and relationships. I mentioned those pastors. Many of us went one-on-one to the faith-based locations or to the equity associations and talked about our need to work together. And it's building those relationships that I think produced the diverse team we have now. But it's going to take an awful lot of continued effort. And you know what? It takes having hard conversations, Michelle. I can remember one early conversation where someone said, "This is a black problem in our community." Now let that sink in for a second. And you know what? You can chase the data, and it shows the neighborhoods where we have issues. But you know what? Until we change the paradigm that every child in this community is our child, and that this is going to take the community surrounding that one child, white or black, north or south geographically, that's the only way we're going to make a difference in this. And I think that's why pulling that cross-sectional group of leaders together was so important, and us being focused on having those hard conversations and pushing through them to find the right solutions.